Not all Tentfire tales are tales of legend of old. Sometimes the Tentfire tales are about the people around you, the family of Hanatas that you call your own. In this tale, Old Strim tells us about a recent occurrence involving Kray the Blade.
Gather round the fire, my family of Hanatas. You notice that Kray the Blade rarely joins us at the fireside tales. It is not his way. However, I wish to tell a tale about Kray today from when we were in Wintersdale, and the 6 thugs who tried to take Mavea by force into the forest some months back. They had planned to do unspeakable things to her. The men had caught her unawares, away from the wagons, and cupped her mouth lest she scream for help or use her magics as they dragged her away. What the men did not know, however, was that Kray was nearby, sitting in the dark as he is wont to do. He arrived as they were tearing at her clothing, their eyes shining with the evil intent they planned. At first they laughed at him. There were, after all, 6 against 1, and with Kray not an overly large man at that. He would die quickly, they thought. 5 of them advanced upon him, weapons drawn, with menacing stares and gritted teeth, as wolves would move against a fawn alone in the meadow. The 6th, the leader, remained behind, holding Mavea down as he encouraged his men to finish off this little shizat so they could get back to their fun. 2 were dead before they took 3 steps, one with a black-handled dagger in his throat, another with one through his eye. The 3rd, a large man with a huge scar across his face, staggered back from the smallish man, coughing and gurgling as blood poured from the slash across his neck, his head nearly severed by the stroke. Kray had drawn his sword with lightning quickness, slicing just below the man's jaw before the attacker could even react. The last 2, seeing the fates of their brethren, now understood their risk. They spread to either side of Kray, weapons at the ready, malice in their faces. They advanced as one, approaching Kray from his right and left, the first with an axe and the second with 2 long, wicked daggers. Like a flash, Kray ducked beneath the axe stroke of the first man, diving backwards with an agility that neither of the assailants expected. Kray's sword sung as he dove, cutting the axe-wielding man's upper leg to the bone. With a groan, the man fell to the ground, blood gushing from the wound to pool on the trampled grass. The second man moved quickly at the now vulnerable Kray, intending to sink his daggers into the small man's exposed back before Kray could recover from his move. But Kray had anticipated just this and, as the tale goes, had done it a purpose. As the man, thinking he had an easy opening, raised his daggers to strike, Kray thrust his body backwards, towards the attacker, sliding beneath the flashing knives and driving his shoulder into the chest of the larger foe. In the same movement, Kray thrust his sword backward as well. Steel met its mark, sinking deep into the man's belly. Kray twisting the blade upward in the same stroke. The man was dead before he hit the ground. The other attacker with a wounded leg attempted to rise and fight again, but he died almost immediately with another of Kray's daggers embedded in his chest. He never saw the small man throw it. Kray then stood up and moved toward the leader, who sat astride Mavea, her eyes wide with fear. The man now held his dagger to her throat.
"Stop now, or I'll be making her bleed," he hissed.
Kray stood before the leader, his eyes intent upon the man's face. The man stared back at Kray, his gaze filled with hate. But what the man did not see was Kray's eyes dart for just a moment, to look beyond where the man straddled Mavea, into the shadows of the trees behind. Without a word, Kray dropped his sword.
"That's a smart fellow,"
growled the man.
"Now I want you to—"
But the man's sentence was cut short, for at that exact moment, a silent figure moved out of the shadows behind him.
A dark, hardwood staff struck the leader in the back of his skull, cracking the bone of his cranium and breaking his neck at the base. The man's corpse toppled off Mavea to the ground at her side. The girl looked up at the one who had so recently arrived to finish off the last of the horrible brutes, her breast still heaving in fear. What she saw was an older, blind elf, dressed in a pauper's robes, with bluish skin and a long, hanging braid falling from his otherwise bald head. It was Brain, also known as the Blind Wind. His monkish skills are impressive, to say the least. His sightless eyes looked down at Mavea, then to the bodies on the ground, and then up towards Kray, who smiled wryly at the newly arrived personage.
"I see I came late to this party,"
the bald man remarked in a soft voice. He did not wait for a reply from Kray, as he knew none would come. Looking back down at Mavea, he asked,
"May I escort you back to the wagons, my dear? 'Tis far too late for a young woman such as yourself to be out here in the woods alone."
The girl nodded in reply, her breathing still heavy. Almost as if he saw her answer, the blind man reached his strong, gnarled hand down to lift her from the ground. Then they began a slow walk back towards camp. After a moment, Mavea looked back over her shoulder, wishing to thank her savior. But Kray had disappeared into the darkness, as he is wont to do. Although I've told this tale many a times around our campfire, as we camp for the night and supper is served, Kray will never speak of it, however, and indeed never seems to be present when I am in the telling.